Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I'm in the garage today just moving stuff around, and I thought today was a good day even though it is pretty cold. I wanted to make a video on changing the alternator in a 1988 to 1991 Honda Civic or CRX. Specifically today we're going to be working on my father-in-law's Y49 CRX SI. If any of those who don't know, Y49 is the color code, and that is Barbados yellow. Not that that matters, but I'm a huge fan of this color. So recently, I've done a few things to the car. It did need a clutch, so I did drop the tranny, replace the clutch and flywheel. I do have a video on that if you guys are interested in doing that job. I had to replace the distributor, spark plugs and wires. That's new. We gave it a fresh tune-up. So the car has been running in tip-top shape, other than the issues recently we've been having with the alternator. So briefly, just real quick, going over some of the issues I've been having. I noticed the lights were getting really dim when the car was running, even the interior lights, and it's kind of a tall tale sign when this starts to happen. I don't know how old the alternator is. I haven't changed it since I've owned the car since 2018, and I don't know prior to that when it was changed. I do know that the battery is new. We bought a new battery for the car when my father-in-law purchased this car off me, so it has been maintained up to that point. And right now I just want to go over a few things before we get started. You always, and this is one of the most important things, we have to disconnect the battery before we work on the charging system. It's very important. A lot of people may not know, but you can get sparked, shocked, or hurt, or cause a fire if you leave the battery connected. So that's the first thing we're going to disconnect, and we're going to get into the alternator and start pulling it out. So I have the new alternator over here on the recent parts shelf. Funny thing is, when I bought the car, it came with this alternator. So they say that problems come in threes. So we recently had the clutch issue, then the distributor issue. So hopefully this is the last remaining issue that we have to deal with. But other than that, the car has been running great, and we have had no serious issues at all with it. So the first order of business is we're gonna get this battery disconnected. Now, a lot of people think, oh, I could take off either lead when I'm working on the electrical system and I'll be okay. That is not true. With this case, since we are working on the alternator, we're gonna take off the ground connection. This is the safest and best way to make sure that you won't get a reaction, God forbid if anything happens. And the only thing I will say with this is you will lose any memory setting in the car because the battery has been disconnected. As you can see, the alternator is right here on the driver's side. So what we're gonna do, now that the battery is disconnected, is there's some electrical connections going to the alternator. That big green plug and this plastic cover is covering a 10mm nut. We're gonna get those disconnected first, that way we don't have to worry about disconnecting them later. After that, we're gonna loosen up the tension for the belt on the top and the bottom, spring the belt off, and then take the bolt out, and then that's pretty much it for taking the alternator out. The only thing I will say is getting this out, a lot of people sometimes, oh, you have to take out your brake master, there's no other way to snake it out. Other people say you have to drop an axle, this and that. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and if you like that way, you could follow me. So let's get these leads disconnected and start working at the tension for the belt. So we're gonna push this cover back, and this is gonna expose our 10mm connection. Now, you could cause a spark. This is what I was saying if the battery is still connected, but being that ours is not, we don't have much to worry about. That's our 10mm nut right there. The last thing for the electrical, we'll just pop this off. Now this eyelid connection's out of the way. The last thing will be this green plug. Squeeze it, pop it out. Pretty simple. Squeeze right here. It's gonna lift that side up and just pull. And that's it for the electrical connection, guys.
So the next thing we're going to work on is getting the belt tension loose. So up here you have your top bracket, and this nut right here, which I believe is a 12 or a 14, I will double check. You're going to crack this loose first, and then there's one on the bottom we have to get to before we can actually release tension on the alternator belt. It's easy if you have these long ratcheting wrenches. They just make life so much easier. So once it's loose, we're gonna back the bolt all the way out. So for the most part up here, you are pretty much done with disconnecting what you have. There is a 14 bolt that you will have to drop on the bottom. So we're gonna lift the car up, and I'm gonna go under and show you exactly what I'm talking about. So we are underneath the car, and I'm directly right under the alternator bracket on the driver's side. And as you can see, the bottom bolt here has to be released in order to relieve tension. So we're gonna crack that 14 millimeter nut right here, pull that bolt out, which comes out on this side, and your alternator should pretty much come out after that. So I got another ratcheting wrench just to make life easier. Break that loose. 14 millimeter nut. Now, on this side, it's going to be the head to your, well, not the head, but your bolt. You're going to pull that through. So after everything is disconnected, you're going to be able to pull your alternator forward and get that belt off. Just make sure it's off the crank on the bottom, which will come right out. Now that your belt is off, your alternator should be pretty much free. Sometimes you gotta wiggle it back and forth to break it loose. Might even have to resort to just prying a little on the bottom. Pry from the bottom where you took that bolt out, break it free. Okay, so it is loose from the bracket. So we are back under the car, and as you can see, the alternator is free of the bracket. This is what I was saying about sometimes you have to pry to break it loose from here if it doesn't work, moving it back and forth. So I know this might seem crazy, but I'm under here now, and it looks like there might be enough space possibly to sneak it out from the bottom. I've heard people take it out from the top, but they have to remove the brake master, and that just seems like a lot of work. So I'm gonna try to snake this out the bottom. If not, let's see what I can make of this, getting the alternator out from the bottom. So I have the alternator kind of hanging out on the rear cross member back here. You can see the pulley. It's kind of trapped. You can't go above because the brake master. You can't go to the side because you got the oil filter and just all those hoses and lines. So what I'm gonna do is this bottom bracket, it has two 14s in it, 1 and 2. I'm gonna take the bottom bracket off, and I'm also gonna remove this plastic cover that covers up the crank pulley. I think there's enough space right here where my hand is that once this bracket's off and I have this cover removed, I think I'm gonna take the tire off as well just so I can get a better view. The alternator should slide out. There should be enough room here. So we're gonna give a test run. I'm gonna take out, like I said, these 14s, there's only 2 of them. Remove this bracket and take this plastic cover off. There should be only a few pieces holding on. Right here is one, it's already loose. The other one is right here. And for the last one, it's right in there. So those 3 plastic screws, this will drop. Let's get that bracket off, and we should be able to snake the alternator out. Let's see what happens.
bolt right here. Oh, see how the bracket moved? Okay, so the bracket is loose. It's just those 2 bolts.
So the bracket's out. As you can see, it's only those 2 14 bolts. They are different sizes, so don't mix them up. One is a little shorter, while the other is a little longer. So they go in certain spots. Now that I got that alternator bracket removed, you can kind of see how much more room you have to work with. So I'm gonna pull this plastic down, and that should be good enough. So I didn't even have to drop this plastic. I left the cover bolt. That's a little bit of a pain to get to. So as you can see, with all that removed, you can kind of get the idea where I'm going with, where you can snake this alternator out. So let's see if we can grab this thing and pull it out this way. Okay. Come on, you're almost there. Might have to twist and turn it. And she is free out the bottom without removing any axles or anything crazy. I'm just checking to see if they're exactly the same. We got the same connection, same mounting brackets. Sometimes these pulleys are different sizes. You want to make sure they got the same amount of grooves. And of course, you always want to make sure your electrical connections are the same. This is what an OBD0 alternator looks like. It's got that brown plug as a female. So we got the same plug over here. So I think this is a match, guys. So now that I know the alternators are identical and this one will fit, we're gonna get this one fitted into the car. Quickly, I just wanted to mention something. This is a little bracket that the harness clips into, which just basically gives the wires extra support. This usually comes on the original alternators, and they don't really ever retain it when replacing it. I've never really seen that before on any of the alternators that I've done for these cars. So thought that was pretty cool to mention. So that might give me an idea that this alternator, even though it looks to be in good shape, that it is definitely aged. Just gonna clean this bolt up. This is the lower bracket bolt. Gonna wire wheel it real quick just to get some of this surface rust off, so that way no further corrosion builds. So real quick, before we get the alternator snuck back up in the back of the car and the bracket mounted, so that way you're not doing this while you're under the car, I like to fit the alternator, the new alternator, into the bracket to make sure that I don't have to adjust anything and I'm not fighting with it underneath the car. A lot of the times when you install an alternator and you put the bolt through, you tighten it down, this little, I guess, pivot piece pushes in and it creates a firm lock onto the alternator. So sometimes when installing new alternators, you have to basically spread these apart and make room for the new alternator. But luckily, I don't really have to do anything. This kind of just fits right in perfect, and we should be good to go. We're gonna fish the new alternator up. Okay. We're gonna rest on the rear cross member, and we're gonna put that bracket back in place now. Remember, guys, one bolt is shorter, so it goes in certain spots. Got one side, got the other. Bracket is fully secure, so I'm gonna get the alternator in place so we can get that bolt and nut through. Alternator is in place. Got the bolt through. I'm just putting that nut on. I'm not tightening anything down. While you're down here, you might as well plug in your connectors, since it might be a little easier from right here, at least one of them. After that, we're going to go on top and secure the top bracket and get the belt on. All right, that big connector's in. We'll go up top and put the smaller one in. Just make sure that plug is in. We're going to reconnect our eyelid. Take the 10 off the new alternator if you haven't already. Reinstall 10mm nut. We're just gonna snug that 10mm down. Don't go too crazy on this. You could end up breaking the entire connector. After you're done, make sure it's covered. And that's it for the electrical. So I have a fairly new belt that I actually ran on one of my other single cams. So this is barely used, probably has maybe 5,000 miles on it. I'm gonna get the good use out of this one because I know it's perfectly fine. Make sure the alternator is all the way forward. We're gonna slip this around. Make sure it's over the bottom crank pulley, closest pulley to the inside. So I would start with putting the belt over the bottom crank first and then slipping it over the alternator. I'm gonna double check on the bottom just to make sure it's on the grooves of the crank pulley. You never wanna just assume, so check the bottom of the pulley, make sure it's fitted, and then we'll put some tension on the belt itself. Just wanted to quickly show you what I was talking about. So from up top, it looks good. It's around the pulley of the alternator. You'll put tension on it and you'll think everything is good, but down here, it isn't fully set onto the pulley. So you have to make sure, sometimes they do seat themselves if this does get stuck, but you could damage the belt and you don't want to do that. So come down here, just make sure it's all together. I didn't put that plastic piece on yet until everything's buttoned up. So now we're gonna put tension on that belt and button up that top bracket bolt. We're gonna reinstall this top bracket bolt. Get it into the alternator. Drive the bolt all the way down, but we're not gonna tighten it yet. Now, we are going to take a pry bar and put some tension on that pulley as we tighten the top bolt so it secures it. So I'm going to stick a pry bar right in between the alternator and the bracket. And I'm just going to go a little easy with the tension. You don't want to make it too tight. Give it a pull down here. That's that right there. You don't want to have too much flex, but you don't want it to be too loose either. That right there feels good to me. So I'm going to hold it right there. And then just tighten it up. Don't forget, once you're done tensioning up on the top, you want to come down here. Just make sure you put tension back on the bottom bracket bolt. You do not want to leave this loose. And that, guys, is pretty much it. I'm going to put the plastic cover back on the bottom. Just recheck my connections over here, make sure they're good. Belt's all secure.
We'll get this battery charged up, give it a start, and I'll show you what she's charging at. All right, guys, so I got the car on the ground. She is currently running. I did have to jump it with the other car because the battery has been so dead. We haven't been driving it. So she's warming up right now. Got the garage cracked open so I don't get killed from the fumes. But battery is charging. I'm gonna show you guys what the alternator is putting out as far as the charging system now as to compared to what the old alternator was putting out. So we're gonna get this hooked up to see what the reading is on the alternator output. So I got the leads hooked up, and as you can see, I'm charging right around a 14.5. Sometimes it jumps up to 14.7. I didn't get a chance to film what it was charging before I replaced the alternator, but it was charging barely above 12.7, so it would never hit 13. So that was a clear indication of the alternator going bad for sure. So that's gonna wrap it up for today's video, guys. I hope this gave you some insight on the alternator and how easy it can be to be swapped out in case you're in need of doing that job. The car is running really good. I'm very satisfied with what the battery is being charged at. I'm gonna continue to let it run for now just so that the battery gets a full charge and, you know, just to make sure everything's in tip top. I would take it for a drive, but it's kind of a winter wonderland right now where I live. I'll give you a quick peek of that as well. Take a quick peek outside. This is kind of why I don't drive these cars in the winter. Got the Element and the Subaru outside for now just to make room in the garage. But the car is running really nice. She's idling really good. Nice low idle. All the lights are bright again. So I'm very happy. Once again, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate you guys viewing the video. If there's anything I could do or any questions I could answer, feel free to ask. Like always, guys, stay safe and have a good one. I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.